Hi, I'm Nadine. On my birthday, my sister handed me a gift box with cameras flashing behind her. I smiled, said thank you, and the next day, gave it to her mother-in-law instead. Not because I didn't want it, but because I finally understood what it was. It wasn't a present, it was a performance. She'd done it before, cropping me out of photos, rewriting my childhood, calling me the unstable artist, at brunch tables full of filtered friends. But how do you fight someone who doesn't insult you outright, just edits you out slowly, frame by frame? What do you do when the lies aren't loud, but the silence is deafening? Want to know what was really in that box? Let me show you. I didn't expect the envelope to hit me as hard as it did. It was just paper, cream-colored, stiff, and sealed with a sticker that had a glittery C embossed in gold. My sister's branding. Of course. I flipped it over a few times in my hand, standing just inside the threshold of my apartment in Eugene, still wearing my coat, still balancing a canvas bag of groceries that was starting to sweat condensation. The envelope had come by courier. Special, formal. I could already guess what it was before opening it, but I peeled it open anyway. The card inside was equally overdone. Florals, script font. It read, "You're invited to Callista's birthday celebration honoring her sister, Nadine Shipman." I stared at the name for a second too long. Nadine. That wasn't my name. Not legally, not professionally, not on any document since I was 17. It had one extra E, a mistake that seemed small to anyone else, but to me, it was a quiet dislocation. I didn't sigh or cry. I just stared at it for a second, heart tightening, not breaking. It had been misspelled on name tags, holiday cards, even at a couple of family events over the years. Always corrected later with a quick, "Oh, silly me," and a wine-flushed laugh. But this time it was printed, mass-produced, sent out, labeled like a product line. It wasn't just careless, it was curated. I set the card on the kitchen counter, unpacked the groceries, and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't tell anyone about the invite, didn't respond right away. I told myself it wasn't worth a reaction. Still, the card stayed on the counter for 2 days. I walked past it every time I made coffee or reached for the fruit bowl. "People may forget what you said," I muttered once, "but they will never forget how you made them feel." I'd heard Maya Angelou's quote before, but now it lodged itself in the room like an echo that wouldn't die. 3 days later, I packed a small overnight bag and caught the early bus to Bellevue. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of my absence. The party was set at her house, a gleaming suburban statement piece, the kind of place with open staircases and framed inspirational quotes in pastel fonts hanging over wine racks. There was a valet, catered tapas, and a guest list that included half the junior board of her nonprofit, plus a few mid-tier lifestyle influencers she always name-dropped. I arrived right on time, and yet, somehow, they had already begun seating guests. A teenage host, probably hired just for the event, smiled too hard as he scanned the list. "Ah, here," he said, gesturing. "We've got you right next to the kitchen. Cozy and close to everything." The chair was squeezed between a swinging service door and a potted plant. I could smell garlic and seared shrimp every time the door opened behind me. My back was to the room. Callista walked by 10 minutes later, dressed in blush silk and diamonds that probably weren't, holding a glass of champagne and leaning into a compliment from someone with a ring light for a purse. When she saw me, she smiled like I'd photobombed her own event. "Oh!" she exclaimed. "I figured you wouldn't mind that spot. You're always so chill." Always so chill? Or always easy to ignore? I smiled back, as if to say, "Of course! I'm flexible." I bend. I didn't eat much. The food looked exquisite, but my appetite had fled somewhere between the shrimp scent and the realization that I didn't know anyone at my table. I checked my watch twice. After the main course, Callista stood up, clinked her glass gently, and gave a speech about honoring family and celebrating the bonds that lift us higher. She didn't mention me by name. Not once. When the servers brought out the gifts, a large silver box sat in the center of the table, with a ribbon and a calligraphed tag. To my beautiful sister on her special day. Callista. No name. Not even Nadine. Just sister. The crowd applauded. She beamed like a bride. I didn't open the box. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked at her, eyes locked, and smiled. Just once. Just enough. It wasn't the kind of smile that says, thank you. It was the kind that says, I see you now. The guest room had too many mirrors. They were everywhere, behind the dresser, above the side table, even built into the closet doors. As I sat on the edge of the bed that night, the one Callista's assistant had made up with machine-creased linens and an arrangement of faux lavender, I caught my own reflection over and over again. Same face, same eyes, except something in the way I looked back at myself had changed. The silver gift box sat next to me, unopened. A remnant from earlier that evening, its ribbon still perfectly looped, like it had been styled for a photo shoot rather than meant to be unwrapped. I hadn't touched it during dinner, not when Callista toasted to me, not when others clapped politely, and not even when she leaned down to whisper, "You're gonna love this." Now, with the hum of the dishwasher downstairs and the quiet click of her husband's low conversation floating through the hall, I finally pulled the ribbon. It slid off too easily, like it had been undone and retied before. I peeled back the tissue paper and found a skincare set, full-sized bottles, arranged in a branded tray. It was a familiar name, one I'd seen recently. I flipped over the box, and sure enough, there it was. A barcode sticker labeled Gifted Collab CO Callista Weems. My name wasn't on it. Her handle was. I didn't curse. I didn't cry. I just reached for my phone and opened Instagram. Scrolling past the usual lifestyle reels, I stopped on a post from exactly 8 days ago. Callista, smiling in a gauzy robe, holding the same product with the caption, "Obsessed with this line. So grateful to partner with brand name for my birthday week. Stay tuned for my full review." So this wasn't for me. It was for the algorithm. I set the box down on the nightstand and stared at it for a moment, my reflection barely visible in its metallic surface. No card, no note, just product and polish. I could hear my father's voice, years ago, when I'd asked him once why he always gave Mom flowers from the same gas station. "It's the thought that counts, sweetie," he said. And maybe it was. But what happens when the thought wasn't even about you? Earlier at dinner, the moment that had nearly broken the evening had come right after the first course. Callista had tapped her glass again, always commanding attention like a cruise director, and said, "Can I say a few words about my little sister?" I already felt myself brace. "To Nadine," she said with the perfect blend of brightness and gravity, "our free spirit, our little wanderer. She may not always land where she planned, but she always lands with grace." Everyone laughed gently, admiringly. The table glowed with good-natured chuckles and half-lidded nods. But I heard it for what it was. What sounded like praise tasted like a patronizing pill. I may not always land where I planned. That wasn't a compliment. It was a papered-over dig. A way of saying I had failed often, but gracefully enough not to cause too much trouble. And maybe they all believed it. That I was the chaotic one, the spontaneous one, the one who bounced between freelance gigs while Callista built her empire of blush and beige. I'd spent years trying not to flinch at those narratives. Tonight, I'd just decided to stop absorbing them. Back in the guest room, I opened the bedside drawer, looking for somewhere to stash the gift out of sight. Instead, I found a stack of Callista's branded note cards. Every one of them monogrammed with her initials in gold. It was always her name. Always her narrative. I closed the drawer, stood up, and carefully placed the gift box back together, smoothing the tissue paper, retightening the ribbon just enough so it looked untouched. I didn't plan on taking it home. Instead, I sat at the vanity, looked myself square in the mirror for the 100th time that day, and smiled. Not the kind of smile you give to keep things civil. The kind of smile that says no more. I got home late Monday afternoon. Eugene was chilled with the kind of dry air that made your skin ache before your jacket caught up. I dropped my overnight bag by the coat rack, pulled off my boots, and let the quiet fold over me like a blanket that had missed me too. The silver gift box, untouched since the party, slid out of the side zipper. It had ridden in the car, made it past the bus ride, sat on my lap like a truce I wasn't sure I'd signed. I placed it on the kitchen table next to my mail pile, where unread bills and grocery lists quietly competed for attention. I didn't open it again. Instead, I made a cup of tea and wandered into my studio space. It was cluttered in that creative person lives here kind of way. Mood boards, swatches, old sketch pads stacked against a wall like they were waiting to be chosen again. The afternoon light carved long shadows across the floor. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my cabinet to grab a paper cutter and saw it. A box. Nearly identical. I paused, then knelt. There it was. Last year's gift. Same brand. Same skincare set. The only difference? The ribbon was navy instead of gold. I checked the labels. They matched down to the expiration date. It wasn't thoughtless. It was efficient. This wasn't just a bad habit. It was a blueprint. One Callista had used for years. Slight changes. A different caption. A new bow. But always the same choreography. I stood slowly, set both boxes side by side on the counter, and leaned against the sink. She had recycled a gift. Again. I grabbed a notepad from the fridge and scribbled down what I could remember from the last few birthdays. A candle with the wrong initial. A scarf she once wore on her channel, before handing it off to me with the tag still inside out. A bracelet that, later, I saw in her "Shop My Closet" post, before it disappeared quietly. It wasn't that she forgot. It was that she planned to forget in style. My tea had gone cold. Back at the table, I reached into the kitchen drawer for a pen and knocked loose a few older cards I'd shoved in there. One caught my eye. Soft blue envelope, worn on the corners. I recognized my handwriting before I even opened it. It was the birthday card I'd written her 4 years ago. Inside, lines I'd labored over, sentences about how proud I was of her courage, her ambition, how I'd always admired the way she took up space even when others wanted her to shrink. There were specifics, little details from when we were kids. I'd signed it, with all my complicated, messy, stubborn sister love, Nadine. No PR tag, no aesthetic layout, just truth. I laid it beside the two boxes, and suddenly the contrast hit so hard it made my chest tighten. She didn't even bother to pretend anymore. When people show you who they are, I whispered, believe them the first time. Maya was right. I'd wanted to believe her mistakes were accidents, that she just forgot things, that her curated life got away from her sometimes. But this wasn't about forgetting. This was about who mattered and who didn't. I folded the card slowly, pressed it closed with care, and placed it back into the drawer. Not because it didn't mean anything, but because it used to mean everything. That was the part that stung the most. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just reached across the table, slid the silver box gently to the side, and made space for something else. Seattle has always had a way of looking clean, even when it's cruel. The air felt crisp that Sunday morning, the kind of bright, sanitized coolness that made everything look filtered, staged. I took the light rail up from my hotel in Capitol Hill to meet Callista's friend Tiffany for brunch, an invitation Callista had sent to make up for the mix-up. The mix-up, of course, being everything she wouldn't admit, was deliberate. The restaurant was tucked in a corner of Queen Anne, upscale, faux casual, the kind of place with eucalyptus on the napkins and waiters who didn't write anything down. Everyone at the table looked like they'd walked out of a curated Pinterest board. Blowouts, designer sneakers, soft beige sweaters that cost as much as my electric bill. Callista was already seated when I arrived, performing mid-laugh at something someone had said. She waved me over with that airy tone people use when they forget they're not on camera. "Oh my God, Nadine. I didn't know you were coming. This is going to be so fun." I nodded, sat, smiled. The conversation danced between juice cleanses and brand partnerships, school admissions, and family dynamics, which Callista handled with all the grace of someone who'd rehearsed her lines. And then, casually, like she was commenting on the weather, she dropped it. Nadine's always been the free spirit in the family. You know, the kind who starts things but doesn't always finish them. There it was. Polished, pleasant, precise. The woman across from me, someone I'd never met before, laughed too quickly. Oh, that's so relatable. I used to be like that in my 20s. Callista sipped her green juice and smiled like a saint who just confessed a small sin on someone else's behalf. I didn't flinch, just cut into my eggs with steady hands and said, I guess that makes me the fun one. But inside, something shifted. It wasn't just the insult. It was the choreography of it. The way she framed me, not as myself, but as her foil. Her contrast, her low-lit background. There's a difference, I thought, between being underestimated and being misrepresented. It wasn't the first time she'd told that story. It was just the first time she had the right audience and the wrong assumption that I was still willing to play along. The rest of the brunch blurred. I nodded, smiled, did the performance. When the check came, I offered to pay my share. Callista waved it off like it was beneath the aesthetic of the moment. Of course not, she said. This one's on the sister fund. I left early, mumbling something about needing to check out of my hotel. She kissed my cheek like she meant it, and I walked away knowing she didn't. Back on the train toward the station, my phone buzzed. It was from Kara, one of Tiffany's friends from brunch. We weren't close, but we followed each other on social for years, mostly due to mutual acquaintances. The message read, Hey. This wasn't cool, and I wasn't sure if I should send it, but I figured you deserved to know. Attached was a screenshot, a group chat. The name of the thread? Fam Brunch Babes. In the chat, I saw Callista's name, time-stamped just after I'd arrived. As long as she doesn't try to make it about her again, we're fine. Just one line. But it split the day in two. Not because it was shocking, but because it confirmed what I'd tried to give her the benefit of the doubt on for far too long. When someone confirms your worst suspicion, I thought, it doesn't hurt less, it just stuns you differently. I sat with it, didn't respond. I just saved the image to my notes folder and locked my phone. The rest of the ride was quiet, except for the hum of the train and the low drone of my own clarity settling in. She wasn't careless. She was calculated. She didn't trip into disrespect. She curated it, captioned it, and shared it selectively. As the train pulled into Eugene, I reread the message one last time and hit save, not delete. By Tuesday afternoon, I'd made up my mind. I folded the silver gift box with care, retied the ribbon just the way Callista had done it, tight, symmetrical, performative. I placed it into a recycled paper bag, the kind boutique stores hand out with too many layers of tissue. It made no noise when I carried it, but it felt louder than any words I could say. I didn't text ahead, didn't call. Just pulled into Mary Beth Klein's driveway in Bellevue and rang the doorbell like a neighbor returning a borrowed dish. My hands didn't shake, though my heart had its own opinion. She answered a moment later, still dressed in what looked like linen loungewear, hair pulled back in that perfect, I don't try but I do bun. Her expression flickered between surprise and politeness. Nadine, she said, her voice low and measured, I didn't know you were still in town. Just for the day, I said calmly. I won't take much of your time. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The foyer smelled like jasmine and faint cinnamon, maybe a diffuser. Every corner looked curated for visitors she hadn't had yet. I didn't compliment anything, just handed her the bag. She raised an eyebrow. What's this? I smiled, genuinely, but just enough. Callista said it was meant for someone who really mattered, I replied. I figured it might be you. Her hand tightened around the handles. She didn't open the box, didn't ask what was inside. Just nodded, slowly. Well, she said after a breath, thank you. And that was it. No dramatics, no snide comments, no performative forgiveness. Just a moment, suspended between two women who both knew more than they let on. I left without asking if Callista was home. By the time I got back to Eugene that evening, the sky had darkened, and the heater in my apartment kicked on with its usual reluctant groan. I slipped out of my boots, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window. No texts, no missed calls, just peace. Until, around 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot from Mary Beth. Not a message, just a photo of her text to Callista. Did you mean for Nadine's birthday gift to come to me? There was no reply yet. The timestamp on Mary Beth's message was already 40 minutes old. I imagined the look on Callista's face when she read it, the freeze behind her eyes, the scramble beneath her perfectly tempered expression, the way she'd have to manufacture a response that didn't sound panicked, but didn't seem cold. I waited, watched the screen. Nothing came. No explanation. No apology. Not even a shrug emoji. Just stillness. That silence, right there, was louder than any excuse she could have crafted. It said everything. I took another sip of wine, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't holding tension in my shoulders. My jaw unclenched without effort. I've learned that people will forget what you said, I whispered into the empty room, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That box, shiny, strategic, hollow, had never been about me. But this delivery? This was mine. The fog rolled in that morning, thick and unmoving, pressing against the window panes like it had something to say. I stood in my kitchen in Eugene, tea growing cold on the counter again, as I stared at the blinking notification on my phone. It was from Alora. I hadn't heard from her since the brunch. She'd kept things surface level, likes on my posts, the occasional reaction to a story. We weren't close. Just another part of Callista's orbit I used to accept without question. Now there was a voice memo. No message. Just that. I hit play. At first, it was hard to make out. Alora must have recorded it from her phone, speaker to mic. But then Callista's voice came through clear as water, smooth as silk. Nadine doesn't really belong in our inner circle. She just doesn't carry herself with the same poise. There was a pause, and then a soft laugh. Not just hers. Mary Beth's too. I replayed it. Then again. She didn't just lie about me. She trained people to see me as less. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a narrative. One she'd been shaping behind my back for years. I leaned against the counter, the phone heavy in my palm. The fog outside didn't lift, but something in me did. Not rage. No. Something quieter. Colder. More focused. I texted Alora back. Was this recent? She replied within seconds. That call was 2 weeks before your birthday. There's more. The second file arrived 10 minutes later. A longer clip pulled from a team meeting Callista held virtually with her assistant and brand consultant. As long as the focus stays on me and the visuals stay clean, she said, voice crisp. She can do whatever, she won't notice. There was silence, then laughter. She's just happy to be invited. I stared at my phone, then slowly opened my laptop. I created a folder, no label, no icon. Just a gray square that now held 2 audio files, a screenshot of the brunch chat, and a scan of the PR barcode from the skincare box. I wasn't collecting revenge. I was collecting truth. Because some things don't need an audience. They just need evidence. Later that day, I received a package from the office supply store, a portable external drive I'd ordered weeks ago and forgotten about. I plugged it in, moved the files, encrypted the folder, and shut it down. I didn't know what I'd do with it, not yet. But knowing it was there felt like armor. That night, I made a simple dinner, grilled vegetables, a piece of salmon, nothing dramatic. I set the table for one, poured a glass of wine, and somewhere between the first and second bite, I realized I didn't want an apology anymore. I wanted a record. Callista had spent years dressing contempt in compliments, in champagne toasts and curated captions. Her stage had always been lit with the kind of lighting that flattered her best features and blurred everyone else's. But I wasn't blurry anymore. Mary Beth never followed up on the gift. Not a call, not a text, not even a comment through the grapevine. That was the game. If you didn't acknowledge it, maybe it never happened. But the message had landed. I saw it in her silence. Callista's Instagram stories were quieter too. Fewer posts. No mention of our sweet birthday moment. No montage. No video of the toast. She hadn't forgotten. She was planning. And I wasn't foolish enough to think she'd stop at silence. I didn't tell anyone what Elora had sent. Not yet. Because sometimes the smartest move is letting them forget you were ever listening. The email came in late, just past midnight. I had just shut my laptop and was rinsing out my teacup when my phone buzzed on the counter. Elora's name blinked back at me. The subject line, "You might want to see this." I opened the attachment without hesitation. My stomach had already prepared itself for whatever it was. But the document still managed to knock the wind out of me in a quiet, insidious way. It was a pitch deck, a proposal for a major brand campaign Callista was courting. A polished 15-slide PDF titled The Weems Family, Reframing Modern Legacy. Slide 2 featured photos of Callista smiling in a sunlit kitchen, Victor at a grill, and Mary Beth holding a wine glass on a manicured porch. Quotes were sprinkled throughout. We believe in tradition, but we speak with today's voice. A home built on grace, grit, and growth. I kept scrolling. My name never came up. Not once. Slide 8 listed key visuals, hero shots, with a bullet that read, "To maintain cohesion and aspirational tone, secondary family figures will not be highlighted." I wasn't a liability to her brand. I was a blemish, one she planned to crop out. I let out a quiet laugh. Not from humor. From the absurdity of how neatly it all came together. Years of being politely trimmed from the frame had just been given a strategy deck. This wasn't pettiness, it was positioning. I closed the document and opened Instagram. Her latest post had gone up earlier that evening. A photo of her holding a coffee mug with a caption that read, "I never lose sight of the people who shaped me. Loyalty is my love language." It rang familiar. I dug through my journal, flipping past sketches and lists until I found the page. 5 years ago, on her birthday, I'd written her a letter. In it, I wrote, "Loyalty has always been your language, even when others didn't understand the grammar." Her post had nearly lifted it verbatim, just dulled the edges, made it more digestible for the masses. Plagiarism isn't just theft, it's identity assassination. I didn't comment, I didn't repost. I just took a screenshot, saved it with the pitch deck, and labeled the folder Stage MGMT. The lights in my apartment flickered slightly as the wind picked up outside. The quiet of Eugene at night had become more of a friend than most people I'd known the last few years. She wasn't just building a brand, she was building a throne. And the rest of us? We were props. Background, cropped edges, and color correction. But here's the thing about someone who's used to controlling the edit. They forget some people keep the raw footage. My strength wasn't in confrontation, it was in documentation. She'd spent so long manipulating what people saw, she didn't consider who might be watching, quietly, carefully, without need for applause. I closed my journal and powered down my phone. The screen went black, but I wasn't in the dark. I had something she didn't. The receipts. And a moment she couldn't control. I didn't RSVP. I didn't ask permission. I didn't even bring a +1. I just showed up. Mary Beth had decided to host what she called a private family dinner for Callista's latest collaboration launch. That was the phrase she used in the group message Elora forwarded me. Private family dinner. But I knew the real guest list was curated down to the bone. Family by title, audience by value. They didn't expect me. That's what made it worth walking through the door. The house buzzed with candlelight and soft jazz, The kind of evening meant to look effortless, but required 3 assistants and a floral budget. People turned when I entered. Not because I made a scene, but because I wasn't part of the script. Callista saw me from across the room, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she plastered on a host's smile. Nadine, she said, drawing out the syllables like they were foreign on her tongue. How surprising. I won't stay long, I said, my voice calm. I just wanted to drop something off. I held the box in both hands. Same size, same ribbon, same metallic sheen as the one she gave me. Only this time, it wasn't meant to be opened. I walked to the table, centered, set for 12, gleaming with gold chargers and monogrammed napkin rings. I set the box right in the middle, turned it so the card was face up, and stepped back. Someone nearby asked, "What's this?" Callista moved too quickly. "Oh, it's nothing, just a little inside joke." I didn't speak. The room did it for me. Silence washed over the table, like someone had pulled the volume down mid-song. Victor looked at the card. He didn't touch it, just read the message aloud. To the one who was always meant to be the background. Here's your spotlight. You could hear a fork drop, literally. Someone at the far end dropped theirs against a plate, and no one moved to pick it up. Callista's jaw tightened just slightly. Nadine, I don't know what you think this is. It's not a scene, I said. It's a return. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't beg to be heard. It simply waits. Victor cleared his throat, looked down at his wine, then slowly stood. I've stayed quiet, he said, because I thought it was just sisters being sisters. But I watched what you've done, and I can't unsee it anymore. His words landed like a weight across the table. Callista's eyes darted to him. Victor? No, he said, calm, certain. You've made her a prop, for years, and the more we let it happen, the more we became part of it. Mary Beth shifted uncomfortably, her fingers curling around the stem of her glass. Guests exchanged glances. No one laughed. No one defended her. The silence was agreement. I didn't stay for dessert. I didn't stay for fallout. I walked out the way I came in, quiet, deliberate, unshaken. I heard someone mutter behind me, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." Too late. I'd already built my own table. Callista stood frozen, the card still unopened in her hand. I wasn't there for the fallout. I never stayed for encores. It was past midnight when I finally sat down on the edge of my bed, the house still and breathing softly around me. The storm outside had picked up, a steady rhythm of rain tapping against the windows, like someone gently insisting I stay awake a little longer. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and opened my laptop. I didn't expect anything urgent, just the usual clutter, promotions, newsletters, unread updates. But then I saw it, an Instagram tag from a distant cousin. The caption read, "Such a beautiful evening celebrating family." Curious, I clicked. The photo loaded slowly, the Wi-Fi crawling under the weight of the storm. It was a wide shot of the dinner table from 2 nights ago, Mary Beth's elegant gathering. Candles, smiles, wine glasses raised. I looked closer. I wasn't in it. Not blurred, not blocked, just gone. Either I was cropped out, or I was never in the frame to begin with. The room in the photo was one I'd stood in. The dress Callista wore was the same one she'd complimented herself in aloud, loud enough for the table to co-sign. The seat I'd taken, empty in the picture. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. You weren't meant to be remembered here. I closed the browser. Not in anger, but in understanding. That photo was the digital version of what had always been true. Their version of family had always been a polished frame, and I'd always been an edge too inconvenient to fit. An hour passed. I stayed up. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from my cousin Rachel, a chronic oversharer with a talent for spreading news like wildfire without meaning to. The message said, "So Callista told this hilarious story about how you stole her prom dress in high school. I never heard that one. Classic Nadine, right?" My fingers froze. I knew that story. Or rather, I knew the real one. I'd borrowed a jacket once. A denim one Callista never wore and had left in the back of Dad's truck. She'd forgotten about it until I showed up to school in it 2 weeks later, and even then she didn't care. It wasn't a dress, it wasn't prom, and it wasn't theft, but it had made a great punchline apparently. "They didn't erase me," I whispered. "They rewrote me." That was worse, because erasure is silent, but rewriting, that's loud. It laughs, it clinks glasses, it gathers applause on the back of your real memory and repackages it as fiction. I scrolled through more posts, the comments piled under Callista's photo, people congratulating her on the authenticity of her platform, how real and refreshing her family dynamic felt. I could have laughed if I wasn't so tired. I didn't want justice anymore. I wanted peace, the kind that doesn't beg for someone to see your side, but simply knows that side exists whether it's acknowledged or not. I opened my voice memo app, not to record, just to hear something real, my own voice. Then, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed a line. "Sometimes the people you want to hear your side will never be willing to listen. That doesn't mean you stop speaking your truth." That line wasn't for them. It was for me. I used to think telling the truth would lead to understanding. Now I know it just leads to freedom. I saved the file, no title, no folder, just there. I closed my laptop and leaned back against the pillows. I used to want to be heard. Now, I just want the echo of their lies to fall silent on their own. The sunlight crept in quietly that morning, soft and unbothered, sliding across the kitchen tiles as if nothing in the world had changed. But I had. I was rinsing out my mug when my phone buzzed once, then went still. I didn't rush to check it. These days, I'd learned that anything urgent would come back louder if it mattered. Eventually, I picked it up. It was from Mary Beth. A single text. "I saw what they didn't post. Thank you for your dignity." That was it. No emojis, no follow-up, not even a period. I stood there, still holding the cup under the stream of lukewarm water, rereading the message until the faucet hissed against the now empty mug. I don't know what surprised me more, that she'd seen through Callista's curated silence, or that she said something. It didn't feel like an apology. It didn't need to be. It was acknowledgement, quiet, direct, and unflinching. The kind that didn't try to make you feel better, but simply confirmed you weren't crazy for noticing the shift in the room. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked over to the dining table and stared at the gift box Callista had handed me weeks ago, the twin to the one I'd returned to Mary Beth. This one I'd never opened. It had just sat there on the corner, tucked behind a ceramic fruit bowl, like a memory I hadn't decided what to do with. I pulled it closer and peeled back the lid. Inside, tissue paper, a branded card with no words, and a whole lot of air. No product, no message, no intention, just space where something should have been. It wasn't just hollow, it was a metaphor dressed in tissue paper. I ran my fingers along the edge of the box, every side polished, every crease smoothed. A vessel made to look expensive, made to imply generosity, but built with nothing inside. Like the dinner invitation, like the birthday toast, like the years of being included enough to be seen, but not enough to matter. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just stood there, the weight of the empty gift in my hands. And finally, I understood. I hadn't returned the gift to Mary Beth because I was angry. I had done it because I'd stopped expecting it to be real. Callista had spent her life giving things that photographed better than they functioned, and I'd spent too long pretending that counted as love. "People show you who they are not just through what they give," I whispered aloud, "but what they think you'll believe is enough." I put the lid back on, folded the box shut, and walked it out to the bin behind the apartment. It didn't feel like disposal. It felt like closure. I didn't check Instagram that day. I didn't scroll for proof or validation. I didn't even peek to see how many people had liked the cropped family photo. I had a message from someone who mattered, and an empty box that no longer held space in my home, or in me. I didn't reply to Mary Beth. I just placed the box in the recycling bin. And for once, it felt like the right place for it. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found out. I was sitting in my usual corner at Pearl Street Cafe, sipping something overpriced but warm, trying to sketch out a new logo for a small pottery shop down in Springfield. It was the kind of peaceful work I used to dream about. Quiet, solitary, uninterrupted by anyone asking me to dim my light for theirs. I checked my phone between thumbnails and saw the notification from my mother. A forwarded image, followed by a single heart emoji. It was a photo, one I hadn't seen taken. A family-only group thread. The caption read, "3 generations of strength, so proud of our circle." Everyone was tagged. Mary Beth, sitting primly on a love seat. Victor, standing with his hands behind his back. Callista at the center, smiling, perfect, just a hair too staged. Even my second cousins on my father's side were in the shot. But not me. Not even a mention. Not even a cropped shoulder. They didn't forget me. They excluded me. Deliberately, strategically, as if my absence helped sharpen their symmetry. I stared at the photo until the brightness of it burned my eyes. They kept me out, I thought, not because I didn't belong, but because I didn't play along. I didn't react. No angry texts, no shaking hands, no impulse to call my mother and ask what the hell that was supposed to mean. Instead, I saved the screenshot, then deleted the message, then deleted the thread. It wasn't rejection anymore, it was freedom. For so long, I'd tried to earn a seat at their table, polishing myself down to the version they found palatable. But now, I saw it clearly. They never wanted me at the table. They just needed someone to hover quietly nearby to make themselves look more centered. Later that day, I walked to a small bookstore off Willamette and bought a new journal. Nothing fancy. Soft leather, unlined. The kind that invites your truth without demanding structure. I wrote the first line without hesitation. I don't need to be understood by people who only recognize me when I'm silent. I didn't write for revenge. I wrote for record. For the version of myself they kept editing out of their narrative. For the girl who showed up year after year with real gifts and real words and was told her loyalty was too intense. For the woman who had spent years being packaged like she was a glitch in the family's brand. I wrote and wrote and wrote until the pages stopped shaking under my pen. Then I closed the journal and looked out at the soft bend of the street outside the cafe, bathed in early spring light. It felt like the first inhale after holding your breath for too long. If you don't see your worth, I murmured, don't ask those who benefit from your blindness to show it to you. I left the cafe, walked home, and sat on my porch for a long while. And that night, without fanfare, I created a new group chat. Not out of spite, not to prove a point, but to begin something that wasn't built on pretense. I added people who'd seen me at my worst and didn't use it as a weapon. Friends who had shown up, even when there wasn't a table to sit at. Colleagues who respected the work more than the optics. I named it the real circle. I didn't leave the family thread. I was never in it. But I started a new one, with my own damn name at the top. The email came on a Thursday morning, buried between a receipt for a new tea kettle and a notice about my library books being overdue. I almost missed it, almost let it sink into the clutter of a normal day. The subject line read, Podcast Inquiry. Behind the brand. At first, I thought it was spam, but then I read the opening line. Hi, Nadine. We came across an anonymous blog post from a few years ago, and we'd love to talk to you. We're producing a series on curated family dynamics and performative branding. Would you be willing to share your story? I reread it. Twice. And then, for the first time in my life, I responded with the full weight of my name. Not a nickname, not the version trimmed for someone else's comfort. Just me. Yes, I wrote. I'm ready. Recording the episode took 2 hours. I sat in my living room in Eugene, laptop open, mic plugged in, voice steady. I told them everything. How birthdays became photo ops. How gifts were recycled like excuses. How I was always framed but never focused. I shared the screenshots, the voice memos, the emails. I even sent them a photo of the repackaged skincare box. The producer was stunned. "You've been documenting this for years," she said softly. "No," I corrected. "I've been surviving it." And then, toward the end, the host asked if I had a personal moment I'd never shared before, something that captured the root of it all. I didn't have to think long. "When I got my first paycheck," I began, "I bought my mom a necklace. It wasn't expensive, but it was mine. I'd picked it out, had it gift wrapped. A few months later, I saw it. Same box, same ribbon, on another woman's neck. My mother's friend. She said it had been a birthday gift." There was a pause. I let it stretch. "I never asked about it," I said. Until now. I didn't expect what followed. Within hours of the episode airing, Callista's name trended. Not for her brand, but for the breakdown of it. Listeners flooded her page with questions, then accusations. A few of her sponsors issued vague statements about reevaluating partnerships. Mary Beth announced she would step back from any public-facing family collaborations. Victor said nothing. As always. And me, I uninstalled Instagram, not in protest, in peace. I didn't need to watch it crumble. I had already left the structure. In the weeks that followed, I started guest lecturing at the local art college. Branding ethics, storytelling with integrity. Students who'd grown up watching people like my sister turn family into content now sat listening to someone who had lived inside the margins of those edits. One day, after class, I stopped by a frame shop and had the old birthday card, the one from the cookie box, preserved behind glass. Not for memory, for proof. I hung it in my home office, just above the sketchpad I now use daily. Not to chase approval, just to create. "I didn't burn bridges," I told a friend one afternoon. "I just stopped crossing them." That spring, I found a quiet lake outside Eugene, surrounded by pine and wild clover. I'd sit there on weekends, sketching, scribbling thoughts, breathing. The last time my phone buzzed with Callista's name, I didn't flinch. I didn't even open it. I already knew what it wouldn't say. I didn't get justice from them. I gave justice to myself. And for once, that was enough.